Now, when I hear the question, why would a loving God send people to hell, some of his children? We have to step back just a little bit from that and go, does God truly love his kids? The Bible says yes, absolutely. Same way I love my children. Now, it's interesting because heaven is described as being perfect. And when we looked at why do bad things happen to good people, we talked about the fact that we were going to have to understand both good and evil for heaven to ever be perfect, because we have to understand both of them completely to say, I will choose this and never go back to this. And yet, when we talk about our own free will and true perfection, it can't just be a knowledge of both of those things, because my wife and I have a knowledge of what love is. We've been married for 30 years, and yet we don't have perfection. We have our own opinions. We have our own free wills that clash into each other. I love my kids with every fiber of my being, but we bang heads too. Now, extrapolate that out to my mother-in-law and my boss and on beyond that, and we don't even have the prospect of perfection. Heaven will be perfect because we will know both good and evil, but it will also be perfect because we will have discovered that God wants better for me than even in my most selfish moment I could want for me. That God wants better for me than I could even know for myself. Now, here's the way perfection happens in heaven. It says that we have to choose to let God be God and not me be God. Now, what happens there is if I believe with every fiber of my being that God wants better for me than I could ever want for myself, of my own free will, I will give him control of my life. If I truly believe that everything he wants would be better than what I could want for me. Now, what happens if my wife had that exact same passionate belief? Then we would both be taking our cues from what God says, and instantly we would become one. The second God says something, we both go, absolutely. The second that God goes, this will bring you total fulfillment, we go, absolutely. What happens if my kids did that? That would bring us into unity. God forbid, what happened if my mother-in-law made that exact same commitment? It would bring us into unity. But if my son, of his own free will, chose to rebel against me as his dad, if he chose to treat his mom with disrespect, if he decided that I'm going to live in a very different way than this family chooses to live, if I find out that he's also verbally and even physically abusive to my daughter, if he's creating dysfunction in this family, I will never stop loving my son. I would never, ever create a scenario where I would not care and love him. But I could not allow him to stay in the family unit and to create that dysfunction. It would break my heart, but I would have to tell him, you cannot stay in this home. And I believe that it breaks God's heart, but he is not going to violate our free will and drag us to healthy. If we choose to not allow him to be the Lord of our life, if we don't want to be in that family by our actions, then we will get what we want. We will not be in the presence of the Lord. But it won't be him throwing us out. It'll be a choice, a free will choice that we make. Now, this may not help to answer all the nuances of that question that you need. You may have other questions that arise even as I said those things. Send them in to God. Why? We're more than happy to continue the dialogue. But I hope this helped.